is the Community Economic Development Committee meeting. I'm John Weddleton.
Dick Trainee.
Ryan Yale, Planning Department.
Andy Honest, Clerk's Office.
Matthew Wilson, Legal Counsel Assistant.
Jane Wyrick, Danish Gardens.
And we do not have a quorum, so any action is not going to be valid to
Okay.
recommend to the whole body.
So,
Assuming members will look the way they want to anyway.
since we've been here, I will recommend we rearrange the agenda, put Danish Gardens first.
That makes sense.
Okay, Amanda, you want to hit this?
Yep. Okay, so this is Danish Gardens retail license application. All of the licensing restrictions were addressed in his operating plan. We do have taxes, fees, or fines due by one or more of the affiliates. And it seems that part of them have been paid, but still some of them are pending. All of the restricted access areas, the safety and security standards have been addressed in the operating plan. There weren't any comments received from the Department of Health. They've received their initial approval of the plan, but will need their inspections. And there weren't any mention of concentrates, but if so, they just need to be stored in temperature-controlled, secure locations.
Question on that one. Do you know if there's an approved refrigerator or is it just any
It's
standard
just, it's a industrial lockable freezer or refrigerator.
And just so you know, on those fines and fees we're talking about, the fire department thing, I've been waiting for her to get back with me on that.
Oh.
She came back to me and told me that it was $165, and that's the fine. And as we talked, that's the one I just paid.
Yeah.
And then she came back to me and told me it was $130. And I said, well, which is it, the $130 or $165? And both of those were inspections, or excuse me, the first one that they say is now there, that inspection was done on my building before I even had the lease. So I'm not sure exactly how it came off as being my liability to pay an inspection that the owner ordered. But in the interest of making it all happen, I'm willing to pay it 100%. The other one was the tax on the building, the acreage tax. We put in the appeal for that, on that, because what they did was, they never contacted us. They just simply threw out an arbitrary number and said, this is what we think your business is worth. But the reality is that even though there may be a tax eventually owed due on that, I leased that building as a turnkey building from a holdings company who leases the building from the leaser of the building, who leases the building from the owner of the building. So there's multiple levels of the ownership in there, and Danish Gardens, who the tax is applied to, we lease that building as a turnkey building with everything in it. So there's no way that Danish Gardens has a building that's worth $900,000 worth of a business, because we don't. I legally don't own that, or I'm not legally obligated to the full amount of that. So we explained that very clearly in the appeal that we put in, and that's been sitting in the tax office. If that is required to be paid in full prior to us getting our license, I will pay it, but it just seems awful strange that I should pay a $9,000 bill for what we have there, or the value of our business, and this was based on our CPAs and our attorneys, is under $10,000, not $900,000. So it just doesn't seem fair that I would have my license held up over a fine that I technically don't know.
Okay, I can check with him again. So I sent an email. She didn't say anything about having received the appeal yet, so she maybe got it after I communicated with her. So we'll check in with her. It will appear on your license as a condition for it, but you have a little bit of time between when you're before the assembly and you get all of your stuff done, so I'll make sure and keep checking with her.
Well, we're going to have our stuff done like immediately right after the assembly meeting if we're approved.
Okay.
We're just about ready to go. We're hoping to be able to get our AMCO and our health inspections right away. Like I said, we didn't have any issues with the health department, and AMCO is all good with our
Okay.
facility and system. We've been inspected so many times as, you know, for our facility before it became vertically integrated. We had already had planned it from the get-go as being vertically integrated.
Let me see if I understand this right then. So, I mean, the fire inspection fees, that seems really simple, but the property tax, so someone else owns the building, but you say you have a turnkey turnkey, which means the fixtures for the cultivation, all that stuff is owned by someone else.
Yes.
But you got a bill, your company got a bill for the property tax on the value of those fixtures.
Yes.
Okay, but that's not your stuff.
No.
So that would have been, I mean, if you owe money now, that would have been from the last
Yes.
property tax cycle. So you said you appealed it, the appeal would have been taken care of by now. What's the status?
I'm waiting.
Is that correct?
John, does he appeal, there was a property owner appeal? Because normally the property owner is one that has to appeal.
So
Well-
you appealed it?
No, I appealed Danish Gardens tax. In other words, first of all, I own all the businesses, but we needed to straighten out, and that's what I told them, is we needed to straighten out the paperwork so our CPAs and our accountants have it all straightened out. It's how it works, is the owner leases the building to my construction firm. My construction firm leases the building to my holdings company. My holdings company leases the building to Danish Gardens.
But you own the, something involved with you owns the building.
I don't own the building, no.
But you don't own the building?
No.
Okay.
This is the tax for the business, not for the property tax on the building. The property tax on the building has been paid.
Right, but you're talking about the stuff in the building.
Yeah, we're talking about the business in the building, and they came back and they had apparently had sent out a letter. We'd never received the letter. They had responded by throwing an arbitrary number at what they thought the business inside the building was worth. We appealed that to them, and that if there is a tax due, first of all, it's not going to be $9,000 because it doesn't matter who owns the building. There's not that much equipment in the building to start with, but the tax needs to be paid ultimately. And like they explained when I put in the other paperwork, that Danish Gardens is going to own a portion of the tax. Pyatt Sons Holding is going to own a portion of the tax, and All Decked Out is going to own a portion of the tax, but it has to be done in a proper way. There is protocol to that, to whereas if I were to take on the liability as Danish Gardens for that whole tax, then that would put the value of my business for my federal taxes at a lot higher than it should be. So when I leased the building as turnkey from Danish Gardens, or from Pyatt Sons Holding, Pyatt Sons Holding is now the owner of the property. They leased the building from All Decked Out Company. So All Decked Out leases the building as just a raw building. We turn around and lease it out to ourselves, which is Pyatt Sons Holding. And Pyatt Sons Holdings, within that group, we put the money in to build the building out to where it was, and we leased the building out to Danish Gardens as a turnkey building.
So every year you get a form from the city, and you fill out the value of all your
I
fixtures.
just got the one for last week.
Okay, so you didn't get that form, that's why they came up with the number.
That's right, we never got that form, and we got it this time because we contacted them and said, hey, here we are, here's where you need to send the address. And in fact, the address on record in the first time around was my address, but they said that they'd sent it out to the building address, which until 4 months ago never had a mailbox.
Okay.
Mandy, could you get with the tax people and find out where we're at on this? Because this is coming to us, and I want to know before it gets to the body.
Okay.
If this has been resolved, so please get with the tax people and find out what's going on.
Yeah.
And like
He
you
needs
told
to
them,
know.
we're able to make the payment, we just need to have it structured in the right purpose, because like my CPA said, you go pay a bill from Danish Gardens for something that actually tax-wise belongs to another business, then it's just gonna screw up our records.
Well, this has to be straightened out, because right now you won't get your license until this is paid, that's what it says here. And it's not really Mandy's, it's Mandy's spot. Were we to approve this on Tuesday, it's Mandy's spot to say, okay, you've satisfied these things, and as far as getting into your business accounting, that doesn't.
Would it help if I just pay the bill off and then appeal it later and never get the money back? I mean, because that's what it'll come right down to.
Let me check with Susan today. I'll go back and check with her, because the last correspondence I had to turn my stuff in on the 7th, I think. So on the 7th, I checked with her. And so let me check and see where they're at with the appeal and what can be done since it
Yeah, I
was.
mean, I'm not sure it was an actual appeal, is what they did was sent me over the original form and had me actually fill out the form
Read that.
myself, because I had never filled one out before, because they'd never sent it to me.
Okay.
Had me fill out the form, and then they said they would adjust. I talked to the people, they told me that they'll adjust it based on the current information.
Okay, so
But I'd
let
just
me
like
check
to know
with
from
her
them
and
as
see
to
about.
what they're looking at, because they haven't talked to you yet since you filled out the form, have they?
No,
I want to know.
And Mandy, you've got
And like I said, if whatever it comes down to, I'm more than happy to pay the taxes on it. We have the money to pay it, but I just need it to be structured under the correct way.
Okay, we'll find out more on Tuesday, because we want to make it simple so Mandy knows, yes, it was done, no, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And if it comes down to they need a payment right away, I can make that payment to the office. And if you would, you could turn around and send a memo over to the board or to the assembly and let
Yep.
them know that it's been taken care of. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so, Brian, sorry, we jumped. I guess that was our licensing thing, so we didn't really jump ahead of it.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Danish Gardens is applying for a special use permit for marijuana retail to total approximately 1,000 square feet within an existing industrial use building. The proposed facilities within an I-2 district, that's a heavy industrial district, generally located northwest of the intersection of Azurite Court and Cinnabar Loop within the Abbott Loop Community Council. Planned hours of operation will extend beyond what is allowed by code. However, condition number 6 on the draft AR will bring the hours of operation into compliance. The closest protected land use is an elementary school, that's Abbott Loop Elementary, located approximately 1,050 feet away as measured in accordance with the criteria of the Anchorage Municipal Code. And the site lacks compliant visual enhancement landscaping, adequate turning and maneuvering, and compliant snow storage area. The ADA accessible spaces are not adequately defined in the submitted site plan, thus the applicant shall be required to resolve this issue with the municipal traffic department. And these issues are addressed in conditions 8, 9, and 10 in the draft AR. This use is consistent with the Anchorage 2040 land use plan. The provided site plans do not show any major alterations to the building facade or structure that would make it of dissimilar character, scale, or size when compared to surrounding structures. And the planning department recommends approval of special land use permit subject to the conditions as stated in the staff report.
May I chime in on that?
Let me wait, it just is a formality, even though it's a small meeting here, you should just wait, and I'll appoint you, but I want to usually check with assembly members first, it's like a routine thing, but you definitely get a chance to address it, because this is very complicated. I think Brian's quick coverage is like, oh, we got some explaining to do here, so.
Some other questions. We talked to the Abbott Community Council.
Excuse me?
Have you gone to Abbott Community Council?
Yes, we did. Actually, we did private meetings.
Okay.
And we
On the
did-
retail license?
Yes.
Okay.
And if I may, some of the issues that you addressed in there, like the turn radius, that had already been discussed and addressed because we're already a licensed facility. And it was not a condition of our cultivation license. In fact, the city had came over and measured our turnouts from our parking lots. Furthermore, we have more than adequate parking. On top of that, we have a back lot that we have shared parking that has over, I think, 80 spaces in the back lot. Second of all, the snow removal area, which was approved, is in the back parking lot, which is a half-acre parking lot. So there was a couple of issues on there that you said we didn't have the proper turnout radius or anything like that. Well, if we didn't have the proper turnout radius, how are we a legal business? Because our business hasn't changed.
That's
That's
correct.
where the
It's in-
explaining comes in.
Correct.
Do you want to run through that, or no?
Yeah, so for reference, since you guys have the numbered packets, I'm going to be looking at page 23 and page 121. So page 120 is where the non-conformity determination from 2004 starts.
21.
So in there it says, site plan dated February 1st, 2000 by Benjamin Owen, shows a total of 20 parking spaces, 8 of which are located on the east side of the building. So the illegal nonconformity for the turning and maneuvering is on those 8 parking spaces on the east side of the building. And the required 4-foot separation is evident. The site plan was approved by Maida Hanson Traffic Engineering Division. That approval appears to be in error based upon the evaluation of the planning department at this time, and it appears to have been missed or potentially overlooked on the last, when the cultivation license was before the assembly. Furthermore, what that did is, since that was approved erroneously, the visual enhancement landscaping along Cinnabar Loop would have not been required because planning staff at the time was under the impression that that was compliant turning and maneuvering space, which landscaping is not required to be in turning and maneuvering space because obviously get in the way of cars. But because that space is not a legal turning and maneuvering area and doesn't meet the required dimension of 24 feet, visual enhancement landscaping is required in that area. So that parking would need to be abandoned, and visual enhancement landscaping need to be installed. So the, if you look on page 23, that's the site plan. So on the east side of the building, you're looking at building A, where Danish Gardens is located. There's a few discrepancies on this site plan. The ADA accessible parking is just denoted by X's. It's not denoted with the actual symbol that's used. As well as you've also got HC, which also would suggest that it's a handicap space, but those two symbols don't line up. And in my discussion with the traffic engineering department, the site plan doesn't match existing conditions. So there's some discrepancies between what's shown in the site plan and what's actually on site. And then that dimension from the end of the parking stalls on the east side of the building to the property line is approximately 17 to 18 feet, based upon the site plan that was submitted with the application. And 24 feet would be the required dimension there for adequate turning and maneuvering.
May I ask what would be the cure for this? Because every single building on Cinnabar Loop, there's not one building that has 24 feet, that has more parking maneuvering than ours. The people across the street, that you literally pull off the Cinnabar Loop, and all of their parking places all alongside of the building are instant as soon as you pull off the side of the street. The ones that are next door to us, as you can see in the axiom in this plot spot, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces there that are obviously closer to the road. They're right on the corner of the road. There's a fence inside there, but they're on the side of the road, so they're not 24 feet. So, and if you go around the corner, you have Great Northern, which is another marijuana facility. Their parking places are certainly not 24 feet off the road. In fact, I doubt their building is 24 feet off the road. And all of the buildings that are along that side there are exactly the same way. And you go around the turn, it's the same way. Second of all, this issue came up in our first meeting. And with our attorneys, you guys had gone out to our site and had measured it and came back and said that the original measurements that you'd taken were a mistake and that we were compliant. Now I'm hearing that the first ones were a mistake and they were actually compliant, but now the second ones were a mistake and we're back to the first non-compliance. So I'm not really getting this. As far as the landscaping was concerned, my understanding was that on the original plot plan that you guys have, which is over 30 years old, that somewhere along the line a planter bed had been moved, but it had not been written into the plan, and that's where Elaine Reed had come up and said that that wasn't in there. However, as a community issue, my building has more landscaping than any building in the Cinnabar Loop. We have planter beds all the way around the building. We have them all the way across the front of the building. On the corner where this plot plan is, there's a very large bed. All the way down the north side of the building, there's a planter bed. On the back side of the building, there's a planter bed. On the back side of the building property line, there's a huge planter bed. All along the back fence line is planter beds. And then when we go to the axiom next door, they have one planter bed. One. We have a 7, they have one. When we go across the street, they have none. You go all the way around the corner, none of them have any planter beds. None of them. So I just kind of feel like we're being held to a much higher standard than any of the other businesses in the area, and I'm not understanding that
Well,
difference there.
You're being held to the standard.
And the rest of
Everybody
the-
else, I can't speak to their properties because they may have non-conforming rights for the lack of landscaping, but we have it in a municipal document that you do not have non-conforming rights to the lack of landscaping, so you currently do not meet code.
Isn't there a code that says that if meeting into that compliance restricts the amount of parking, then the compliance for the landscaping code is exempt? I just read
That's
that.
true if you're unable to meet the minimum amount of required parking. I think the minimum amount is 22, 23 spaces. I have to check in my staff report, but you currently are providing an access to parking on site. You have 34 spaces that are available. So you could lose, theoretically, up to 12 spaces and still be in compliance with code.
So what is it that you're trying to get me to do here? Put in another planter bed?
What we're requiring of you is to meet code. and come towards conformance.
Well, Ryan, wouldn't it, I mean, if he just took those 8 spots off the picture here as parking, called it snow storage, then he's good, because he's got plenty of parking. He just doesn't call them out as parking here.
Correct. That would fix the turning and maneuvering issue, but it wouldn't fix the landscaping issue. You still have the requirement to install the landscaping.
Okay, so he could put in landscaping, not draw it in as parking, and then
So
And
that
then
would
that
solve
would-
it. And then
Put
you
in
would solve it.
put in landscaping beds on top of my pavement parking area? That's,
Well, you would have to dig up the asphalt and put it in the planting bed.
That's correct.
It's kind of how it goes, you know. I mean, I've been through it too. When you develop a building, you put in landscaping now.
There is quite a lot of existing landscaping, so based off of what we have, I would like to understand why that's inadequate, because it's a lot of planters.
in consideration, what we're thinking here is in consideration to, you said somebody that might be under a non-conforming. Well, I know for sure that Great Northern Cannabis is not under a non-conforming code because they're a new business. We have 10 times the landscaping they have, and we probably have 5 times more parking spaces than they have. So I'm not understanding how Great Northern was able to get past this code, yet we're being held to a stricter compliance than another like business that's under the same licensing and under the same requirements of code.
I wouldn't say that that's a fair comparison due to the fact that their site is orientated very different than yours. They do not have 90-degree parking right off of the right-of-way like your building does. At their facility, you have to actually enter into a driveway. They do have some parallel parking spaces along that driveway, but the majority of their parking is located to the rear of the building.
They have parking in the front of their building.
They have a dumpster screening in the front of the building.
And as far as I recall, there's 2 parking places right next to the dumpster screening and a wheelchair parking right in the front of the building.
And that very
And
well
that
may be true. I don't have
that
the site
certainly
plan in
isn't
front of me.
24 feet. to
But what's
make
the
any
trigger
parking.
on, below a certain number of parking spots, you don't have, as you have more parking spots, you have more landscape requirements. So if they just have a couple in the front, that would close the trigger.
But they also have them down the side of the building and the back of the building, so they do have plenty of parking spaces.
Yeah, so currently it's all new development sites, is the way that it's been interpreted in code, are required to install compliant landscaping to whatever standard is required by code, whether
Right, but it
that's.
bumps up. I mean, you don't have to, below us like 20 or something like that, you don't have to do interior landscape, interior
Right.
parking, it's just perimeter
Right.
and so on.
So what is that calculation as far as percentage in the code? There's a percentage of square foot to your land, the size of your land to the size of your,
It's in relation to the number of parking spaces when it triggers interior landscaping. But
what is
perimeter
considered?
landscaping is something that is required at all new development sites.
And what is that percentage of?
It's not a percentage. It would just be along all frontages, with the exception of turning and maneuvering areas.
Well, I understand that, but I'm saying how much landscaping are we talking about? Is that all the way around the perimeter of the building, it's gotta be fully landscaped?
Nope, just on where frontage is a right of way.
And how much landscaping is required?
It's an 8-foot minimum planting bed along that frontage.
Okay, I have a planting bed along the front of my building that's 70 feet long and 3.5 feet wide. Goes all the way across the front of my planting bed. And then also on the corner of the building, there's another planting bed that I believe is 11 foot by 17 foot.
But Danny, that's not shown on your site plan here. If
But
you
also
show it on the
3.5
site plan,
feet
that
is
would
not
fix
8
the issue.
feet. And that's right, if it's 3.5.
It's 3.5, it wouldn't meet code.
Is it 8 feet by what?
8-foot minimum width,
It's 70 foot width.
70 feet long, 8-foot width.
You need 70 feet long by 8 foot wide.
No, based upon, you keep throwing out 70 feet long, so in order to meet the code, it would have to be 8 feet wide.
By how
So a
long?
lot deeper than what we have.
I understand, I'm just trying to, I'm
By
not
the
trying
length
to,
of
I'm not
the
trying to,
lot.
by the length of the lot.
I think he's
With the
saying that the
exception of turning
length of
new
it
buildings.
depends on the portion that faces the right of way.
So it's gotta be 8 foot deep by the entire length of the lot.
Correct.
So how would you get into your lot if it was all the way along the perimeter of the lot, 8 feet wide? How would you drive into your lot?
Exactly, that's why I'm saying turning and maneuvering areas are excluded from that. So if you had a driveway in here, you would not need to put landscaping in there, but you don't. You currently are accessing via a separate lot. And you have a shared access agreement.
On the front, we access directly off the road.
Correct, correct. You have a shared access agreement through this lot to get to
No, I'm
your
talking about on the very front of the
On the
building.
very front, you drive right up.
You drive right up. There's no into.
Correct, but this is a turning maneuvering area that's currently illegally non-conforming because it results in turning maneuvering into the right of way.
So that parking has been non-conforming since
We've been-
occupied the building?
We've occupied the building and we've been reapproved for the building, and now we're being told after we've been occupying it for 2.5 years, after we've been reapproved to occupy it, that now we're not legal.
That's correct, that's how it appears. We also, the traffic department could not find any approved plan from the cultivation application. They're not even sure if they were even able to review it, and they also couldn't find an approved plan from the traffic department for the building permit.
How did we get here?
Yeah.
How come
Exactly.
we had this meeting and gone through this big packet? We didn't have.
And I've spent $1 million
Spent a lot of money.
getting ready for this.
Well, in your case, it sounds like you got lucky for a few years, so it's one of,
Without knowing it.
you know.
Exactly, and I'm not saying, we're not trying to save face here and say, oh, we're gonna ignore this. We're admitting all of our mistakes here, and we're saying that definitely things were approved in error, and it was caught this time. The comments submitted by the traffic department for this case simply state that they were not able or don't believe that they were even, had the opportunity to look at the previous case for cultivation.
With all due respect, they did. They came in and we had this issue before where they talked about the turning radius on the front of the building for the access. Then they sent people over to our building, they actually measured it. I was there, they physically got out and they measured the space out. Then they came back and said, it's approved. It was sent to you guys and the whole thing was approved. Now here we are 2 years later telling me, oh, that they didn't do that, that it's not approved and it's not acceptable. And I'm not quite getting that.
Well, there should be some documentation of that, if that's the case. And I would say just resolve that with the traffic department.
So,
If we can get an approval from the traffic department for how things sit as is, then this issue is resolved. But we need to see documentation of that.
so does this mean that it's going to put off my assembly approval or a possibility of approval again? Because if it does, I'm out of business. Straight up, I am out of business.
It would be a condition of your approval.
So it's a little bit different process, so we're not sure what'll happen on Tuesday. And we don't have enough, our people are out today, so we don't have enough people here to often will vote and have a recommendation in the assembly. We can't do that with just the two of us here. But were this to pass, were this, the assembly to accept this on Tuesday, you still have to meet these conditions. So what we say when we approve it is we approve it subject to the conditions, that's how we do it. And the conditions are, you gotta take care of that tax thing, you gotta work with the traffic department, you gotta, whoever's in charge of landscaping, do that. So really, what we do is we pass it back to staff to verify those conditions are met. Once they are, you get your license. We're pretty much out of the picture, we would just rely on staff at that point. I mean, this is, and they've admitted crazy sloppy stuff here, and I wonder, there must be documentation to them going out to
I'm really concerned here is that once we get past this and they come up and your department comes up next year and says, oh, well, all of this stuff was a mistake, and now there's this new stuff here that we have to deal with. I'm really confused here because we've been playing by all the rules. We've been done everything you've told us to do, everything you've asked us to do, we've done all that. And now here we are sitting here 2 years later telling us that everything you told us was wrong, and now we got to do all of this new stuff to get past what you guys want now. So, I mean, what happens next year? Does it change again?
I'd actually rephrase that. You weren't playing by the rules, but you were told you were.
Yes.
Now we're saying, oops, you have to follow the rules. So you had a couple of years where you weren't following the rules.
But
Was
my
it
understanding
followed?
was, John, is that when before the first time we came here to this meeting, we were told that there was a parking turnout compliance issue. And in which, right after that, the inspectors and the people, the powers to be came out and they measured it. And they came back and said, hey, no, you're in compliance. Otherwise, like I said, the issue was brought up in the first place. But when it was approved by the assembly, there was no condition on the assembly's approval for a turnout parking. So obviously, by that alone, then it had been rectified in that time. Like I said, I was at the facility the day they came out and did the measurements. And so I know it had been rectified. But now we're coming back and saying, well, they know they really never came out to the building, and I really didn't see them, and you really are not in compliance. And so, you know, you say one thing, then you say another thing, then you say another thing, and then and the third time you say it, you say, well, we were wrong the first time.
Yeah, but I think encapsulates it correctly. There were some mistakes made. So, but when they measured the first time reading this packet, I think where they did not include the landscaping. Then we go, ooh, the landscaping was required, now you lost 4 feet. Is that?
Well, when the original approval came out in 2000, it was still the same site plan that we were looking at in 2004. And it was clear that there wasn't adequate turning and maneuvering space from the end of the parking aisle to the property line. It was still 17 or 18 feet approximately. So it's just speculation. I can't really say why they decided to approve that or why it was approved as is, because it was the same requirement under old code as it is under new code at 24 feet when you have two-way directional traffic accessing the site. So because that approval happened in 2000, that led to the landscape plan being approved in 2004 by the planning department because they figured it was approved turning and maneuvering space. Nobody had questioned at that time in 2004 whether that turning and maneuvering was compliant, which they should have done. Then when the previous cultivation facility application came before the assembly, it was a condition of that approval to resolve with planning whether the on-site turning and maneuvering requirement is met in accordance with Anchorage Municipal Code. In order to satisfy that requirement, I did check the previous file. It was initialed by a member of the planning department with a note saying spoke with traffic is okay. That approval is not, it's not the way it should be done. We don't have a stamped approval from the traffic department to put into the file. Traffic doesn't have one, so traffic can't verify that they actually said that to the planning staff.
Normally there's no form, but rather like we have it here, I think. So you would generally have that, right? A piece of paper.
Correct.
Even though it's brief sometimes. So can they
Right.
go out and measure again? I mean,
Correct,
maybe
yeah.
we have some confusion there. It's possible that he does mean it. We goofed somewhere again.
It's possible that the site plan perhaps is incorrect, that, you know, the measurements on the shown on the site plan don't actually match what's out there. If that's the case and traffic department goes out and verifies the adequate turning and maneuvering is there, then
Is
there's
that 17 feet from the building to the property line?
17 feet from the end of the parking space.
And how long is the parking space measurement?
Approximately 20 feet.
So it'd be 37 feet to the parking heads, the tire stops.
37 feet to the tire stops to the property line.
I tell you, there's not a building on Cinnabar Loop that needs that. There's not one.
Yeah, that's
And
probably
there very
true,
well
but-
might not be, but a lot of those businesses may have legal non-conforming rights. But as it stands right now, you have no legal non-conforming rights for that.
So, I think Dick.
I simply would like planning department, traffic, whoever needs to do it, go there and measure it, so we know what we're dealing with.
Yeah, that has to be.
You know, I
read.
want documentation to be written down, so we're not in 4 years saying, well, we think we did it, but we're not sure.
That's correct.
It's not how
I
we
would
do
like to
business.
see that documentation as well.
I would
I
too. I
was
mean,
just as
you
frustrated
told
as
us
the
that there was a
reviewer.
document where a person signed off and said that they did it, and said that they approved it, and they've got a signature, an initial with it, so there is a document saying that somebody did it and somebody approved it.
You would think.
So,
So let's make sure we get that, and I don't know how quick they can do that, this is Thursday. Again, we don't really need it by Tuesday, but it would be comforting to have some indication resolution. And then,
For us, comforting for the guy that owns the
well,
business.
I do too, you know, and then maybe help us on what is a simple way to resolve this. I mean, to some extent, is they got so much parking, they just say, look, we don't need these 8, we're not gonna call it parking, that would help there, with the turning maneuvering, right? And then
Right.
the landscaping, that'll be an issue, I mean. it seems
my
to have-
understanding was that the landscaping was a percentage. This is just my understanding, that the landscaping outside of the turning maneuvering is a percentage of the property size is how much landscaping it is.
No, that's incorrect.
So how do we determine how much landscaping we need? That's what I'm really getting at. Let's take out the parking maneuvering, okay, the turning maneuvering. Outside of the turning maneuvering, how do I calculate what the space I need, is it going to be 8 feet wide all the way around the perimeter of the property?
Just 8 feet wide along the abutting right of way. Just along
And
the
that's with any new business is 8 feet long.
correct. That's minimum planning bed width for visual enhancement landscaping.
Okay, I understand that's the code, but with all due respect, I've never seen a single building in this town that has an 8-foot parking bed on the entire road that it goes to. How do you get into your parking lot? You
Well,
drive
no,
through
it's
your
not that
private
road, you have a gap for the access point.
Correct.
Which
So
says
is
you
it
could
8
be
feet wide less a gap, or?
whatever, 22 feet or.
Yeah, the length of it is kind of dependent on, the width is what's set. So the length is dependent on whatever the lot size
And what
is.
requires you to do this? I mean, is this all buildings or all buildings that have a new permit for something? If you get a new permit to change a window in your building, are you required now to have that? in there?
All new development projects, so all new site development projects.
All new
So-
site development projects. The project was developed long before 2000.
But it's a change of use and it's a new development occurring on the property. When you apply for a land use entitlement like this, you open yourself up for an entire new zoning review, which is what you've done and what's been conducted.
And I'm understanding that now. Is what I'm not understanding is why this was not brought to our attention 2.5 years ago. And why it was
I
approved.
understand the frustration, but like I said before, the approvals were made in error. We're not denying that, we're not hiding that, but this is a situation that's
The
before us that can't
approvals
be.
were done in error, but the liabilities are now mine.
Well, but the, you know, if the mistakes hadn't been done, you would have had to have done this 2 years ago. So it's not like you're getting. some
I understand that,
requirement,
but
if it was a requirement.
If
then-
it was required of me 2.5 years ago, I may not have rented out the building, and I might not have gotten myself $1.5 million in debt, knowing that I don't have the control to just tell the landlord, oh, well, I've got to put in these beds, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. I would have had at least some control over the decisions of my future, not gotten myself buried in $1.5 million debt, and then come up 2.5 years later telling me, well, we're gonna mount your debt by saying that your business is illegal now.
You know, to some extent, maybe at that point, but when I look, and I know Ben Hoyne, he's a mechanical engineer, and some reason he got involved with the site plan, and that was unfortunate. He's a good guy, but he's a mechanical engineer. You know, your engineer is really the guy, or someone who drew this, your civil engineer.
These prints, we didn't have anybody draw our site plans. These plans.
But that was the goof, is when people go forward with developments, it's on us, developers, to get a good person to draw these things and know the code and tell us what we need to do before you start your operation. And then that goes to planning. It really just looks at this and puts some faith in the engineer's stamp.
Well,
that it's
like I
correct.
said, we didn't hire an engineer to draw these plans. These plans were drawn in, I think, 1987, when this building was built. And we just put in for a change of land use permit. And that change of use permit actually took, I believe, the city, between all the departments, 14 months to review that change. And in 14 months, with all the departments reviewing and having plenty of time to review, none of them came up with this. And they went ahead and approved our change of use. And then a year later, they approved it again. And now,
Change of use permit is tied to the building permit. It's not part of the plan review process.
okay, we went in for a plan review, or we went in for a change of use. That required a plan review. We tendered in our plans. The plans were reviewed. 14 months later, they come back and said, all is good. They gave us the change of land use, or the change of business. Then a year later, we go to the assembly, and after it has to go through all the departments to make sure everything is still in order. It's approved again. And now, here we are on the next approval, or this isn't even a renewal. We've had 2 renewals already, and now we're on the 3rd license, and now all of a sudden, it's like, I feel like all the rules are changing based on what we've been told by the building department, the planning department, and the assembly, and now we're being told at the last minute that the rules have changed. And it's changed because, well, the planning department made a mistake. We made a lot of mistakes. And now that we're gonna come clean about our mistakes, we're going to put a huge monkey wrench in your spokes last minute. So my question is why wasn't this brought up 2.5 years ago? Why didn't somebody do this 2.5 years ago? If they would have, we would have addressed this 2.5 years ago, not at the moment when we really need the license. It just doesn't seem fair at all. Just doesn't seem fair to us at all.
I agree with you, Dane. It's not fair, and we're not hiding it. We're fessing up to it and we're owning it.
But it's my liability.
But I would make clear the rules did not change. I mean, there was a
Correct.
mistake, that no one changed the rules on
No.
it. The rules have been there for a long, long time.
John, from my point of view, it appears that they have changed. When I'm approved, that means that if I'm approved, I had to have followed the rules to get approved, correct?
Well, that was our assumption at the time that there was.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So I'm not saying that the rules changed, I'm saying the rules for us changed. Because we were approved, and we were reapproved. And so as far as we know, we've been following the rules. And now today I'm finding out that we had followed the rules. So what other rules am I not following that I wasn't told about before? How many other things are we gonna run into that we were not told about before? We were told, in fact, before, we were told, yeah, you followed the rules. Here's your approval. And here's your reapproval. You were following the rules again, so here's your reapproval. Now all of a sudden, no, we were wrong. You're not following the rules, and it's your liability to fix them. It just doesn't seem fair to me.
Well, the rules are voluminous, but they are somewhat clear. And when you have a civil engineers tend to know them, and they look in that, they've got a permit, and they look at the site, and they know what the I mean, any of these landscape requirements.
Are the-
Parking requirements are clear.
Are the people who approve these plans civil engineers?
There might be some involved.
The majority of them over there in that department are PDs.
Okay, well, if they're civil engineers, and they approved it, and you're telling me that maybe my civil engineer should have been smarter than their civil engineer in saying that it doesn't meet the code, but we didn't have a civil engineer. We simply used the blueprints that were available, and it was the only engineers that were involved in these civil prints were the city of Anchorage's engineers. And each one of those came back and never mentioned this. None of them ever mentioned this. And then 2.5 years later, we got an engineer coming in and saying, oh, well, my bad, we missed that.
Okay, so, to resolve that viewpoint. So, where are we going with this? And you get someone out there, the traffic will go measure. I mean, wouldn't that be normal for them to do? They won't trust this site plan. Does he need to provide a new site plan?
So this is an old one, right?
Is it?
Correct. The one that was provided, the application is from 2004.
I don't think anything has changed. I don't think anything has changed. In fact, I know nothing has changed on the bill.
So there is a requirement in the Assembly Resolution as written, resolved with traffic, the parking lot layout, design, and signage. If traffic is unable to go out there and measure between now and Tuesday, that resolved condition still allows them that ability. So it's not holding the applicant up by not having traffic go out there before Tuesday to make the measurement, but they will make that measurement before final approval is given for the conditional certificate is issued.
So now with the landscaping, does he have to talk to a civil engineer to draw a whole new site plan showing that landscaping on there? Would that be required?
It would require a revision to the site plan, which would require a drafting of a new site
Is
plan.
So if he gets a new, civil engineer comes out, draws a new site plan, takes that parking on the east side out, then that gets rid of that turning radius issue. If it exists, I mean, they'll measure and make sure, but if the measurement, you just take those 8 out, he meets the parking requirements, then it just drops down on the landscape. He's gotta add 4.5 feet width on the landscape.
Correct.
That's pretty much the gist of it.
Correct, yeah.
So
When
it's
the
not cheap,
situation
but
is
it's
resolved.
not, I mean, that's not crazy,
Well,
not so
didn't you
expensive.
just say that before the conditional certificate of occupancy would be issued, that this would have to be addressed?
Or the license.
Not the conditional certificate, it's not occupancy. Probably your final, the CO, not your CCO, but before the license and the special land use certificate. So you'll have your special land use permit certificate that's posted on the wall with your licenses.
Right, I understand.
Before
And I
those
only
are
asked this
issued, that'll
because
have to be
just
resolved.
last week, we were given our CCO and our CCO, mind you, which is kind of troubling me, is that all this stuff is being brought up. Just last week, I was given a CCO for the retail, the cultivation, and the extraction on my department, on this building. And all these conditions that you're mentioning here, they're not on the CCO. So now.
Well, those are certificates of occupancy. That wouldn't be the same thing. That's a different.
That's a building safety issue. So that's stuff about like structural requirements, handicap access. That's.
I'm getting more confused. You're telling me that,
We need to, you're getting.
You're telling me
confused
that this
because you're
stuff is-
combining entitlements.
but I understand that, you're telling me that this parking issue is something that's done by the planning department, or by the building department. These are all building
Traffic
department
department.
issues, okay?
Traffic
So the building department and the traffic department is part of the building department, is that correct?
Different department.
So.
We all
Can we
work
schedule-
together.
How can we schedule a meeting with the traffic department? Is that something on your end, or do we need to do it directly?
You can just contact the traffic department directly.
They're right upstairs.
Yep, yep, they're right up this staircase.
It's a bit of a-
I just don't understand how we got to this point if the traffic department is required. It's required for the traffic department to sign off, because you're telling me now that the traffic department has to sign off to make this all good. So if they're required to sign off that it's all good before it becomes all good, how did it get all good for the last 2.5 years? That's where I'm really confused with.
It may be, I mean, and they said there's a thing, but you kind of have a clear direction now. And that's, it's almost, you can focus on that, but focus ahead and just go up there and talk to them, see what it takes to resolve it. It could be fairly simple. So I kind of move on from the past, really.
And that's what I'm trying to do here, and in the past, though, this issue was brought up before. And somebody came out, and I imagine it was from, I can't imagine it was the building department if it's not their department, and it wasn't your department, so it wasn't you guys that came out, but somebody came out there and actually measured it and approved it. Otherwise, it would have been a condition on my first license, is that correct? If they would have came out and measured it and said that it was wrong, then it would have been a condition on my first approval. But it wasn't a condition on my first approval.
But we don't have any documentation of that. We don't have any approvals from the traffic department. I'm not saying that didn't happen.
I know, but it's what
We
I'm
just
saying
don't
is we do have the
any-
approval from my business, which would vicariously say that if it's required for me to get that approval from my business, then all these other approvals have to come in first. And I have the one from the business, then vicariously that says that it was approved by those departments.
Okay, but so we're going in circles here, so we've been over this. So you have some conditions, and it's frustrating, but it may not be that hard to fix. Okay, so go talk to traffic. Perhaps their measurements, they'll go out and measure, maybe you're fine. We don't know. You need to go to them, talk to them. Maybe they'll say, you don't have the room to do what you gotta do. Potentially, you could just erase those 8 spots from a new site plan and you're good. So it's not gonna be that difficult. And then add 3.5 feet, 4.5 feet to your landscaping and have that shown. I mean, that's, so it's a drag, but it's not, this is
Well, I mean,
not
it's still,
crisis level stuff.
I understand, but it's still a matter of digging up 8 foot of my parking lot all the way across and then planting landscaping.
It'll be beautiful. So we gotta move on.
I don't own the building though. So I mean, it's not beautiful to me, it might be beautiful to the owner of the building.
And that's been a trick for many of these operations. So, but we gotta move on. So I think we understand where we need, and the snow storage was not really an issue because there's plenty of room. Is that right? In fact, you'll have 8 spots for it.
Correct, yeah.
Well, on top of that, I have a half acre of shared parking area and snow storage, and this was addressed as well. This was addressed the last time around, the snow storage. In fact, we had to have whoever it was that was doing our drawings, I think it was Dave Seymour at the time was doing our drawings, he had to draw into the drawings where our snow storage area was. We drew that in, it was approved, and here we are a year later, it's all of a sudden not approved again.
Well, bring that drawing then.
Right, bring that
Yeah, we
drawing that
have
was
a
approved.
highlighted drawing that was submitted.
So I was gonna ask also about if, I don't know if traffic, like potentially when they came out 2 years ago, if they gave you any documentation of that, that would be helpful too. I assume that when they come out and do inspections, they give you something and then they do their write-up and send it to the departments. So if you have anything that was
I'm
given
not sure I
to
do,
you-
I just know that it became an issue, somebody came out and measured it, the issue went away. And now here we are facing the issue again.
Well, that may be what happens again. So we gotta move on because we got another one. And you can just walk right upstairs. You might find that it's good. So we move on. And thank you. Sorry for your frustration.
Can you tell me, are these issues here, do they warrant stopping my license application?
That's kind
So
up to
it's
you.
it's the same process for any of them that have like really all of the licenses have had conditions of approval, so it's the same process that your previous license went through, that everybody else's went through. They'll have all of these conditions listed on them, and the assembly will approve this document, which includes those conditions being completed. And so, like John said, the departments monitor whenever they get those reviews approved by whichever department needs to do it. And then when we get all of those saying that they've been approved, then the license and the certificate can be issued.
We've done this before.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bothered by the fact that the conditions are growing instead of decreasing. When we knock one out, two more of them pop up. So,
The guy you should talk to.
in fact, I have talked to him about it. In fact, I've
Okay.
retained him, and I have talked to him about it. And my understanding is that some of these things just are holding water. But
Okay, we gotta move on.
Yes.
All right.
So Tuesday, and if you
Gonna keep this
get with
going.
traffic and have a resolution or something, it'd be great to hear. Look forward to that on Tuesday. Yeah, very good.
That community council meets tonight. I know you had two neighborhood meetings, one with 4 people and one with 9, I think. But I would suggest you go to the community council meeting tonight. It's at the elementary school. And you may have a bunch of
We've been
people
to those
show
meetings.
up. Huh?
I have been to those meetings.
I don't. Well, I'm just suggesting that they're meeting tonight. Because
You
this
know
is
what
coming
time,
from the
sir?
assembly Tuesday. It would, I think, behoove you to show up there tonight.
What time do you know?
6:30, starts 6:30, ends at 8:30.
And that's at the elementary.
At the elementary school, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I've been to several of those meetings with you about Danish Gardens.
I just don't want you to run into any more blind walls. I would simply go there and say, hey, this is coming in front of the assembly on Tuesday. Okay?
Okay,
Thank you.
moving on.
Fifty-eight, 56.
Okay, looking at Anchorage Bowl, you guys wanna sit up here? Good morning, so we will introduce ourselves. You are,
My name is Sheldon Landon.
okay, so we're recording, so people aren't here. Okay, so, I think, given the time and that they're so similar, can we combine them? To do it, so we have 3 licenses up within the same location, same operator, is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay, so, do you wanna run through?
Sure. So for Anchorage Bowl, there's the retail, the cultivation, and the manufacturing license. The general requirements of all 3 licenses, the restrictions were addressed on their operating plan. There were no taxes, fees, or fines found due. All of their restricted access areas, the safety and security standards are addressed in their operating plan. There weren't any comments received from the Department of Health. They had their initial approval for their retail plan, they just need to get their inspections. And then for the cultivation, similar, no comments from the Department of Health, they just recommended the odor log, which is consistent for all cultivation. And then the manufacturing, no comments from the Department of Health, they're just pending a permitting right now.
Okay. Questions? Ryan?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Anchorage Bowl is applying for 3 special land use permits for marijuana retail, cultivation, and manufacturing. Licensed premises area for each use will be 727 square feet for retail, 498 square feet for cultivation, 566 square feet for manufacturing, within an existing 2,116 square foot commercial use building. The proposed facility is within a B3 district generally located northeast of the intersection of Northwood Drive and Spenard Road in Anchorage. Planned hours of operation may extend beyond those of neighboring uses, but they will not be operating between midnight and 8 a.m. as restricted by Anchorage Municipal Code. Closest protected land use is a homeless and transient shelter, and that's the Claire House, located south of their location, approximately 615 feet away. The site has obtained non-conforming rights to the lack of visual enhancement landscaping and pedestrian access, compliant snow storage space, turning and maneuvering area, and available off-street parking is shown in the submitted site plan. And this use is consistent with the Anchorage 2040 land use plan, the West Anchorage District Plan, the Spenard Corridor Plan, which is still in draft form, And it provided the site plans do not show any major alterations to the building facade or structure that make it of dissimilar character, scale, or size when compared to surrounding structures. And the planning department recommends approval subject to the conditions as stated in the staff report.
Thanks. How's the electricity?
What is there right now is sufficient for the applicant's needs.
Okay, comments?
Just, what did the community council say when you went to that?
They approved us and said they just blessed us.
Was that Smart Iron Community Council?
That's what our
So I noticed in the staff report, it says, no comments from Sonora Community Council, but then there is, within it says on page 15, I think in the applicants section, that they voted and it all passed. So is this a timing issue?
It's just that the planning department hadn't received written comments from the community council, but I believe Sheldon had included resolution of support or an MOU in the application. So it's a little different. It's that's part of like his community engagement report and his memorandum of understanding. It's a little separate from comments received on a specific case.
On page 15, what is the Barb Marley appearance? Ron, did you see the comments?
I did not.
It's on page 15.
All right, where's the crew cut?
15 of 153.
Yep.
That's from the community council.
Community council does not want a Bob Marley appearance.
Yeah,
visible
what are they-
to the public on the outside.
Any idea what they're talking about?
I don't know what that is.
Okay,
Probably
thanks.
the colors, the Jamaican colors, probably they don't want green, red.
Is this some new? Yeah, I don't know what that's about.
Okay.
That was written a while ago?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never seen.
Only thing out there now that might even represent that is the new green sign that it's required to post. So.
Oh, you're using the new sign? They're using the new sign?
Yeah.
A new sign.
Yeah,
That's great.
so.
Let's take a picture of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Are you using green
teal
signs
out
for
there.
marijuana?
Yeah.
You know, this, these
People are green for marijuana.
Oh, green for marijuana. Okay, teal for.
Is that what
I
that's
like that they're.
They're-
that would be a good
You like
idea
that?
for all of
Sure.
them.
Good job. You picked the green signs. Nice.
Okay.
Big deal.
Well, that's good. I'm glad those are the signs. So I had a couple of questions. And I guess a comment. It says in here that you went door to door in the neighborhood or something. You personally met people within 600 feet.
I've been there since 2001.
Oh, you have a business in there now.
Well, no, prior to, I was an artist. I'm an artist, and so, but I've been at that location since 2001. So I know. I mean, so it's. I don't know. Would you say personally go to door, but
I know them all.
It's, I think, the phrasing, page 13. Anyway, but that's good. We've done that. We did have a couple people who went around the neighborhood and met everybody.
yeah, no, I know. I mean, I guess I do. I mean,
He partakes in the community of the
Yes.
area, so he knows
and I
everybody
hold
that's in
barbecues,
there.
and I invite the neighborhood to come over and we have barbecues, but that's prior to all this.
But yeah, so you're operating out of this building, or have been?
Yes, I was, like I said, again, I'm an artist, so I build custom water features. I've been there since 2001, and I just get to know my neighbors.
Okay, well, that's good.
I help the homeless and give them jobs, and let them shovel and sweep and clean up, and pick up trash,
And then there's a comment of fixing up a decrepit building.
and then I gotta pick up my building.
So you've been in a decrepit building, now you're gonna get on and make this thing great.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's actually different.
He's an artist, he would be the decrepit building.
We've been there, done that.
Yeah.
So, which is good, we've seen that a lot of the marijuana stuff that they.
So we're doing-
Cleaned up the
yeah,
site.
cleaning
Yeah,
it
we
up.
had to clean up the site for all the parking and the cleanup and the exterior layout and the access to the doors and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's gonna be better than what was there probably existing.
So then, on the picture, it says there's an 8x10 Connex unattached.
No, they're both being attached as part, there's the Connex cut in half, but they're a feature that's being added to the building that we got the building permit for and got the full structural requirements, and so they're being tied together as per the the structural requirements of the building code.
And so those will actively, they'll have.
One
active part of
happened
the
to help
operation.
him have a secure entryway area for people to come in. So in the building that was there, it wasn't large enough to have a nice entryway, a safe entryway to come in, like most of these retails all have a area that everybody walks in, and then you come in after the security check and you come into this space. That's what this was in his place. And then another piece, we were adding the other half of the Connex on another portion of the building to clean up an entrance and be able to allow a little bit more room back by the cultivation area. But they both were part of the building permit, and both had to meet full, normal, permanent building structure requirements. And it's going on more and more in Anchorage. We're doing a lot of Connex structures in a lot of places.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it was good. That was puzzling too. So. Then there was, so you have non-conforming rights, and they can verify it, we're good, right?
That's correct.
You double measure twice.
Yeah.
So lack of pedestrians, so, I mean, there's a sidewalk on Spinard Road, but then like a walkway to its entrance, which is a Connex now.
And I believe there
It's
is
in the
one-
parking lot, yeah, the Connex entry is from the parking lot. So obviously it's paved from the parking spot because it has to be, the handicap parking spot is there, and so then you just walk up to the door. Yes, what the lack of pedestrian access is the new requirement in the new code that came in a couple of years ago that said you have to take it from your building and put a 5-foot path all the way to the main street. And what happens in some places they do it, some places they don't, but it's whether or not you have grandfather rights. And so can they get there? Yes, it's going to be paved and they can get there, but it's not going to have its own dedicated little 5-foot path to Spinard. It'll have an access to the street that's out front.
Yeah, and then there was setbacks, and I think that was, so you have grandfathering on that.
Yes, correct.
And that's just the buildings, you're not
Yeah.
gonna move the building. And then landscaping buffer? Along with
So
that.
he has non-conforming rights for the lack of visual enhancement landscaping. However, he does have the requirement to maintain what's existing.
There's quite a bit there.
So,
But it just, in a lot of these old businesses, and this is just like many of them, we file for non-conforming rights. If we get them, we enhance the sign as best we can, or if we have to, whatever, we have to move toward conformity. But in this case, he was granted the rights to leave it there. There's large trees out front. I mean, he's got probably landscaping that's better than most places, but yet it's not required. So the whole point is trying to, if we don't have to, we want, I work to let the owners have the rights that they have to their property, and then we submit the plan that meets that right. And so in this case, he does have landscaping, but it's not required landscaping, so it's not specific and exact as per the Title 21.
And you've got R3 to the west and north. So, and I think I know this building, but how close is this? I mean, that's been an issue with people. And you did the mailing, and you
Yes.
have neighbors right up against your building, essentially, right in your
Hotel.
backyard. And are they okay? Have you talked to them?
Yeah, they've come over, they visit my place, you see how much work I've done, supported me throughout my whole, it's been a rough road, so.
So it's been a rough road to get to here.
Well, yeah,
Kind of
Shelton and the architect had an altercation that happened that you may not know about.
I was the one that was in the news, I was the one that was shot, so.
Oh, I was shot in the newspaper.
The-
You were shot by your architect.
Yes.
Correct.
Once you find out who it is, so you don't hire him.
What?
Once you find out who it was, so you don't hire the architect.
Okay, well, did you get a new architect, or did you have a?
We go through the permit.
Yeah, we were done at the,
It was the last day that we were getting changes on the architect plans. We got those changes, and we haven't had to use the architect for this project anymore.
Okay. Good.
Tell me about Clare House. How big is that homeless and transit center? It's 600 and some odd feet from your place?
Yeah, the Claire House, well, I'm thinking they had just moved in when I started that, but, yeah, it's probably, it's a little ways down, not very far.
How
but
many
it's-
people?
How big is it?
Yeah.
It was I think it was an old hotel, so it's, it's not no 600, it's probably 30 people maybe?
So do you have security already planned for your full
Yes.
security? Because we want to make sure Gary's secure.
Yeah, we have, you mean from video to actual physical security?
Yeah.
So we have actual video security as well as, alarm security.
Bulletproof glass.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
we have,
bulletproof glass
we have
on the scales.
One of the things that, one of the things that I implemented was the Conex thing that everyone was talking about, was so that we secured we put bulletproof glass, and you come up through into the Conex to purchase or whatever, during hours of, like 11, late hours, 11 to 12, or not 11 to 12, 10 to 12, or 9 to 12, or early morning hours from 8 to 10, you would only have access to this secure area, so that to lessen the risk of employees, or to deter you from, wanting to do anything that's,
How many employees you got employed, you know?
as of right now, it's just gonna be, I have 2 partners, and so, and I have, so we would say 1, 2, 3, 4, say 5. We'll start with 5.
Okay, I've got nothing else. Drop by and see how those connexes work.
They'll look good when they're complete and finished,
Yeah,
and
we're-
they're tied into the building. They'll look good.
Anything else?
One around town.
So,
Connexes are good.
Yeah, the new CEI, we're taking care of the old Kinnick building, Kinnick Power Plant. That's all gonna have connexes inside and everything all painted up and stuff. We're doing a lot of connexes in there they're a recycle company, so it's kind of a cool theme to go inside. So some of the offices, so there's gonna be, there's a lot more of the Connex ideas coming into play, because there's a company in the valley that sells them, and they've stockpiled a bunch, and so now all of a sudden people are trying to come up with ways to use them. We're doing a double Connex for another car dealership on Dowling Road. It doesn't even look like 2 Connexes, but it is, and it's all been sided and looks really nice. And they're really structurally sound, and so the nice thing with it is they are going to be used. They're part of what moving forward is with regard to the recycle world that's happening there.
And mine have already, when you pull up, you won't even know that they're Conex. They're already been sided. They look part of the building.
Yeah, I think there's a huge potential in it. We actually we have something on Tuesday about
Oh.
mobile food units and connexes, and that kind of broached the topic of, can we allow them further in the city? But that's a separate issue from today. So often, I think Ron's seen, in this committee, when we have a full committee, we would go and have a recommendation to the assembly on Tuesday, but since it's just 2 of us, we can't do that today. So I would hope that you would be there Tuesday, be at the end of the meeting, so you get to watch us all evening.
Bring your popcorn.
I told them how fun they are.
Yeah. And often, it just comes up and it goes very quickly. We didn't see any big issues here, but someone else might, and just be there possibly to answer some questions.
Okay.
If something comes up. So anyway, anything else? Is that it for our day?
That's it.